So, Sea Life Centre. A friend of mine was doing the audio for a new exhibit at the Sydney Sea Life Centre. It was all about the Great Barrier Reef and they needed some music. And the references that they gave for the music were things like the Hans Zimmer Planet Earth score, Finding Nemo, David Newman, John Williams, just the kind of stuff that got me into doing this in the first place. So I was totally on board. And they needed music for all the different areas of it. So they've got a bioluminescence area with jellyfish that light in the dark, and they've got a night on the reef section, which is a bit more kind of spooky and threatening. And there's a whole section at the end, which is, it's 3D projected, and it's the journey of a sea turtle, and it's all scored to picture as if it was a film, because it's this kind of 10-minute section that plays throughout and then it loops back round again. So that all had to be, all of the highs and lows and the action had to be kind of scored to the frame. So the first thing I needed to do was a theme for the Great Barrier Reef, partly because I wanted to score it in the order that you would hear the music, and also because once we have a theme we can use that throughout and twist and turn it and use it in different ways. I figured it shouldn't be minor, because that would sound a bit too kind of oppressive and brooding. It doesn't really fit. Conversely, I didn't want to do something that was too jaunty and fiddly and detailed. That doesn't sound like the Great Barrier Reef to me. The Great Barrier Reef is full of life, it's teeming with activity, but it's really old and it's really big, and I felt we needed to focus on that and kind of give it a bit more reverence and respect and make it a little bit hymn-like, so kind of medium speed, positivity, but with a bit of pathos. So, I don't know why, but I ended up in E major. And I started off by outlining a major scale and a major arpeggio. So scale. And then I just come down. A good rule for music and melodies generally is theme and variation. It's establish something, repeat the thing that you've established, and then twist it just enough so it's familiar, that the audience knows what you're doing, but it's fresh. So I've got this thing. It's kind of a mirror of itself, so it's already familiar, and then always good to do a suspension. It's quite an emotional sound. We've got this. And then I went to the minor. A bit more hopeful. Suspension. And another suspension. Quite poppy chords. And then, repetition variation, I just repeat the first phrase. I put a chord in the middle to make this chord feel a bit more important. And that's it. So once I had the theme, I then made what I call a sketch, which is just played on piano, the whole thing, the whole 4 or 5 minute thing, with some sections where all the music's kind of laid out like the theme was. I know what the melody and the harmony are. Some sections where it's just a gesture or a texture, and then I make some notes above to say what I want to do with the instruments, the orchestration. And then I've got kind of a map of how the music should sound from the first moment to the last. Once I've got this piano sketch together, the next step is to go through pretty much instrument by instrument, from the double bass, cello, all the way up to the piccolo, playing in where I think they should play, playing in what their parts would be, to kind of orchestrate it using really good sounding fake instruments. I'll always try and get a real player on it. Even if it's just one solo instrument, it will make a big difference, brings humanity to the score, and gets me out of this setup and actually making music with people. Having said that, I recorded this with a 41-piece orchestra. It was the Macedonian Symphony Orchestra, who are brilliant. But I did it sat here because they were in Macedonia, and I did the session over Skype, basically. So I could see what they were playing, I could see what they were doing, and I could hear what they were doing, and I was chatting to the conductor. Then they sent me the parts back, and I reckon I ended up probably 70% live, 30% not live, partly because I leave some of the samples in to give it a bit of weight and body, but also there was stuff in the mock-up, stuff in the samples like harp, choir, percussion that we didn't record live. We had strings, brass, woodwinds in the live session. So everything that wasn't covered in the live session, I needed to keep in the fake versions. So that all blended together gives it this really rich, full sound, but with so much of the humanity and the detail of the live players in the mix, which makes such a big difference. So here's a quick blast through the piano sketch first of the theme, followed by the fake instrument orchestrated version of the theme, and then finally the full mix with everything together. Final piece that you hear, or you will hear if you go to this exhibit at the Sea Life Centre, is the journey of a sea turtle. Now, as soon as I was kind of made aware of this, I thought that has to be a bassoon. That has to be a solo bassoon. It's one sea turtle, so it has to be a solo instrument. And a bassoon kind of has that sound that when I think turtle and it needs an instrument, it fits perfectly. Now, bassoons are quite, I guess, typecast. They get used quite often for kind of comedic stuff. They can sound a bit duck-like and a bit sort of slapstick in a way. And I did use it initially because the first time you see the turtle, it's kind of waddling out of the sea and it's a bit hesitant and a bit clumsy. And I wrote this little melody that kind of stops and starts and works really well for that. But then when the sea turtle gets onto its kind of mound and is safe, there's this little melodic thing that is a bit more kind of sonorous and tender, and it sounds beautiful on the mid-range of the bassoon. It's such a lovely instrument, and it's capable of sounding gorgeous.